And joining us now, Todd Blanche, former President Trump's lead defense attorney. Mr. Blanche, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Just 9 hours of deliberation for a 7-week case. The jury dispensed with this in rather short order, and it was a sweeping victory for the prosecution. Are you surprised at how quickly it came and the rejection of the defense case in its entirety?
I mean, surprise is probably the wrong word. That's what juries do. You know, juries can decide something in 5 minutes or 5 days, and we don't know what went into their decision or why they decided the way that they did. But this was a verdict that we were expecting. We're going to appeal, and we're going to win on appeal. I mean, that's the goal. The goal is this is a step in the process of our justice system, and the goal is to appeal quickly and hopefully be vindicated quickly.
We'll talk about the appeal in a moment, but many people, analysts, legal analysts on all sides of the issue, looked at this and regarded this as the weakest case, the flimsiest legal foundation for it, witnesses with tremendous baggage. Are you surprised you couldn't convince even one juror to say, I'm not sure I can convict here?
Well, a trial there's evidence at the trial, but then there's evidence that didn't come in at the trial. And we fought this case for over a year before we started trial in April. And a lot of what came into trial in evidence, a lot of what didn't come in is a reason why the jury obviously reached the verdict they did. So shock and surprise at what happened? Not really. I mean, we didn't think we were going to get a fair shake in Manhattan, and we didn't.
What's the evidence that you think you should have gotten in that would have made a difference?
Well, there's a lot of evidence that should have gotten in that didn't come in. We asked to bring in evidence, for example, of tax records of some of the witnesses. That was one of the theories of the prosecution. We weren't allowed to do that. There's a reliance on counsel theory that would have been, we believe, helpful to our defense that we were not allowed to bring in. The judge, as judges can do, limited in lots of ways our cross-examination of witnesses that made it a challenge. Again, we don't know why the jury decided what they did, but there was a lot more to the trial than just what happened in April.
Do you expect the DA to ask for prison time? It's available in this case. Do you think the DA will request it?
I don't know what DA Bragg is going to do in run up to the sentencing in July. I would hope not. You have under the guidelines and the rules of the court and what normally would happen, President Trump would not face a day in prison. Putting aside the fact he was president of the United States, the conduct that we're talking about is 7, 8 years old, 9 years old. He's a grandfather, a husband, a father. He should not go to prison. I don't know what the district attorney is going to do.
What do we think the judge will do here? Because as you said, for a typical case like this, a Class C, the lowest level felony, somebody with no prior record is almost 80 years old. Not the typical case where someone goes to prison. Do you think the judge will depart from that?
I hope not. We're gonna fight. That's what this process. It doesn't end yesterday when the jury comes in. It's just part of the process. So hopefully not.
Well, it's interesting because the judge now holds Donald Trump's fate and very freedom in his hands. Donald Trump has made no secret of his disdain for this judge, and even on the courthouse steps right after the verdict yesterday, once again called him conflicted, called him corrupt. He's in the past attacked the judge's family, witnesses, the like, been subject to a gag order. Would you advise your client to maybe to dial down the attacks on the judge in light of the fact that the judge is holding his fate in his hands?
It's not just President Trump has complained about the judge. So have I. I mean, there's publicly filed motions about what we believed gave grounds to the judge's recusal. So it's not just President Trump who's complained. It's his entire defense team. And he's trying to get elected. And so it's not my job to tell him how to communicate to the American people about why they should view this case as something that is other than the right thing and the right way that District Attorney Bragg should be handling cases, and the judge as well. So you're right.
Is it a smart strategy to stand on the courthouse steps and rip the judge who's going to sentence you and decide your fate and freedom in 6 weeks?
I mean, you say rip the judge, but it's also President Trump expressing his very strong views about why he didn't get a fair shake. So yes, it's a strong strategy. I mean, of course, it means that we have an argument we have to make to the judge who has been criticized, but we still will make that argument, and I hopefully will be successful.
You're confident on appeal.
Yes.
What's your number one issue? Don't give me a legal brief that you haven't written yet.
I think the recusal issue is meaningful. I think the statute of limitations, the way that the background of why this case was brought is meaningful. I think that the witnesses, I do not think Michael Cohen should ever be somebody who can be relied upon to convict somebody.
And then finally, you're going down to Florida. You've got another case, the federal case over the mishandling of classified documents. Is it your expectation that that case will not go to trial before Election Day?
I have no expectation. You're right. We're going to be down in Florida next week with my team. We have a 3-day hearing at the end of the month, and there's a lot of work to do, and we'll see.
What was the president's personal reaction once they went behind closed doors and in the waiting room?
I still am today shocked at how he reacted in a very positive way. I mean, there's this public persona of President Trump. He was stronger than everybody around him. I mean, everybody saw when we walked out of the courtroom, he huddled with everybody. That wasn't us telling him what to do. That was him giving us confidence. It really was of what he knew he needed to do and what he needed to say. And he went and he said it, and I was impressed at the way he handled it. I mean, he had to hear guilty 34 times, standing there. And so I think he's committed and he's resolute. I think he feels as strong today as he did yesterday about what's going to happen in November.
Mr. Blanche, thank you for your time on a busy morning. Appreciate it. We should also note that we did invite representatives from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office to join us this morning as well, but they declined.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't miss the Today Show every weekday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific on our streaming channel, Today All Day. To watch, head to today.com/allday or click the link right here.